Thanks, Kate, and really appreciate everybody joining us today on behalf of the National Center on After School and Summer Enrichment, which is one of the Office of Childcare's National Technical Assistance Centers. We're really pleased to see folks from all across the country today, including Utah, Michigan, Oklahoma, Oregon, and many other places. Thanks so much for joining us. It's in the interest of truth and reconciliation, I would like to acknowledge that the headquarters of my organization, Education Development Center, is located on the traditional homelands of the Massachusetts people, which includes 4 contemporary tribes: the Matakeesit, Natick, Ponkapog, and Namaskit. I'm Siobhan Braden, Director of Training and Technical Assistance for NCASE, and I'm also joined by a couple of my colleagues today as facilitators. You've already met Kate Goddard. Preeti Washington is doing our technical and collaboration facilitation, and Heidi Rosenberg, our Director of Research, will be sharing the new brief and also moderating the panel. We're thrilled to have with us Jillian Luckner, who's the policy manager from the After School Alliance. Jillian is a long-term partner with NCASE and is going to be sharing some great perspectives from the field with you today. We have some wonderful state presenters joining us who will tell you about the work that they're doing around addressing school-age needs and licensing regulations. From Arkansas, we have Woody Sue Herline, who's the out-of-school time program coordinator for childhood services at Arkansas State University. We have Onika Luster, also from Arkansas. She's a program manager with the Division of Childcare and Early Childhood Education at the Arkansas Department of Human Services. And from Oregon, we're pleased to have Alicia Gardner, who's the director of the Office of Childcare and the Early Learning Division at the Oregon Department of Education. And we also have with us Beth Unverzag, who's the director of Oregon Ask, which is Oregon's state after-school network. We'd like to thank our long-term partner, the National Center on Early Childhood Quality Assurance, for reviewing this brief and providing examples, and also for being a great collaborative partner as we do this work together to support states, territories, and tribes. So thanks so much. Not sure if we have any folks from ECQA joining us today, but just wanted to give you a shout out. So we'll get started momentarily with some polls to help us understand who's here and to help us learn a bit more about what's happening in your jurisdiction around school age needs and licensing regulations. We'll have some state presentations, and we'll of course share our new brief before we get to the state presentations. We'll have question and answers and a panel discussion, and then wrap up and feedback. So let's go right to our polls. Our first one is, what is your role? And Preeti, if you could bring that poll up, please. You'll see we have a number of choices. And if you do select other, then it would be great if you can put in the chat what kind of entity you are, what your role is. Excellent. Let's see, we have a lot of state licensing agency staff. We have a number of childcare resource and referral folks. We have some state after school network folks, fantastic. We have some childcare providers and staff. So it's wonderful to see this whole range of folks joining us today. And then we have a number of other folks that work with state, territory, or tribal agencies in other roles. Thanks. Can you go to our next poll, please, Preeti? Okay, the next question is about school age and out of school time licensing in your state. So the question is, how are school age or out of school time programs addressed in your jurisdiction's licensing regulations? There are 3 questions for you, 3 answers for you, and then there's an unsure, because you may not know directly in your role how these are addressed in your state, territory, tribe, or local area. This is really helpful for us, though, to get a sense. And we also welcome you throughout the session to share links to your jurisdiction's licensing regulations that are specific to out of school time. And I see somebody has already put something in there about their state. Thank you so much. Okay, looks like we're slowing down. And so about 54% of folks say that school age or out of school time is addressed in the general or umbrella licensing regulations. About 23% say separate licensing regulations for school age or out of school time. 5% school age or out of school time not specifically referenced in licensing, and about 18% aren't sure. Thank you. And I think we'll now move on to Heidi, who's going to share the new brief with us and then get our conversation started. So I will move us on there and pass it over to you, Heidi.
Great, thank you, Siobhan. I am Heidi Rosenberg. I am the Director of Research for NCASE. It is a real pleasure to be here with all of you today. We're very excited to launch this new brief and have some state examples here to unpack some of the considerations that we put forth in this brief. So just to start, we know that licensing regulations are often framed around the developmental needs of very young children. But what we found is that nearly half, about 45% of all of the children served through CCDF subsidies are school age, which is defined as ages 5 through 12. So that's a significant portion of the subsidy population. And in fact, we have a series of state profiles that we have put out every year with updated annual profiles that you can take a look at so that you can get a sense of what the proportion of children served through subsidies that are school age is in your particular jurisdiction. And I know Kate is going to drop the link to those profiles in the chat if you want to take a look at that to see what your particular jurisdiction's context is there. So when school age programs are able to attain licensure, they're better able to serve families who utilize subsidies to help pay for care. That is often the initial qualification in order to be able to accept subsidies in a given state. And they're also able to better access additional quality supports. So being able to help school age programs attain licensure and facilitate their pathway to licensure is a really good way to help to promote equitable access to quality care for children and ensure that working families are able to access care that helps to promote workforce participation. So the brief that we put together here is based on a review of some selected states' school age childcare licensing regulations or requirements. And it draws on a scan of state childcare licensing regulations that was conducted by the Afterschool Alliance, in addition to additional information that we gathered as NCASE. And it's also informed by the licensing scans conducted by the National Center for Early Childhood and Quality Assurance. So the brief offers state childcare licensing agencies a list of key considerations for ensuring or creating school age licensing requirements that meaningfully address school age needs in a variety of areas, including staff qualifications and professional development requirements, developmentally appropriate programming, and other such areas like that. Next slide, please. So I'd like to just share some key takeaways from the brief regarding the key considerations that emerged from our scan. So one key takeaway was the importance of helping licensors understand what safe, quality school age environments look like. So one of the states featured in the brief, in that particular state, the statewide after-school network supports the training of licensors to work with school-age environments by creating a realistic school-age environment on the training site. So this allows licensors to observe the ways in which school age can look different from early childhood and understand some of those key differences and what makes for a meaningful and safe and quality school-age environment. It's also important to ensure that staff pre-service qualifications are inclusive of school age related credentials and degrees. So many states are mentioning school age credentials in the licensing requirements help promote awareness of these professionalization opportunities for school age professionals and ensure that staff at school age programs have training and pre-service qualifications related to the populations with whom they'll be working. Many states have school age credentials, and making explicit reference to these credentials when listing pre-service qualifications, as well as other youth development related coursework and degree fields, in the description of pre-service qualifications helps to elevate the importance of this age group specific training. And it's also important to offer ongoing staff development and training on school age topics. So ensuring that that ongoing training includes a menu of topics of direct relevance to school age is really important in helping to make sure that there's that meaningful connection between the regulations and what they're promoting and the environments and the populations being served. So for example, Arkansas's out of school time regulations include training on the youth program quality assessment tool, the YQA, as one way for OST staff to fulfill the ongoing training requirements. And they also offer a menu of other OST related topics in that menu of ongoing training and PD to ensure that fit between the ongoing training and the needs of the population served. Next slide, please. And then a few more of the key considerations here. So one is consider using under 18 staff for cross-age peer mentoring and youth development benefits. So using under 18 staff under direct supervision when they're working with children can help promote this positive cross-age peer mentoring relationships with school-age children, and it promotes the early career development of the young staff members. And it also aids in ensuring low staff-child ratios at OST programs. So it's essentially a win all around. One state featured in the brief offers a youth development associate credential to high school graduates as well as to juniors and seniors in high school who are enrolled in a career and technical education program. So this type of innovative approach benefits programs, the youth staff members, and the school-age children that are served by the program. Another takeaway was the importance of promoting developmentally appropriate curricula and programming for school-age children. So it's important to ensure that the programming for programs serving school-age children is tailored to the developmental needs of that age group, and that it leverages children's interests in growing independence. So for example, Arkansas's out-of-school time regulations call for programming that include project-based experiential activities that promote youth self-expression, that target life skill development, and that encourage critical thinking skills. Another state's OST regulations, out-of-school time regulations, reference the importance of youth development and suggest that program activities in after school should offer an enrichment contrast to the formal school day environment. So by calling explicit attention to the ways in which this programming can and should be tailored to the developmental needs of school-age children, these licensing regulations can help to shape how programs and providers serve school-age children and offer topics on which programs can focus training and PD activities. And then finally, it's really important to recognize the need for this type of school-age focused training and PD to happen by trainers with school-age expertise. So in addition to referencing issues such as developmentally appropriate programming and school-age tailored health and safety trainings and school-age regulations, it's important for childcare agencies to ensure meaningful implementation of these regulations by contracting with TA and PD providers who have expertise in school-age and experience working with this age group. So statewide after-school networks, which are available in all 50 states, are a great resource for school-age specific TA and guidance. As previously noted, nearly half of all of the children served through subsidies, CCDF subsidies, are school age. So this makes it vitally important that states address the needs of this age group in licensing regulations and in the TA that's offered to providers. Next slide, please. So we know what quality comprehensive after school looks like. And as I mentioned earlier, some states already call explicit attention to some of these elements of comprehensive after school programming in their school age licensing regulations. And providing these specific examples of what developmentally appropriate programming looks like in licensing regulations can help to provide a blueprint for how providers can best support this age group. And including these specific details and elements can help to focus TA providers' work with the school age program to ensure that they're addressing these important components of school age programming. So with that, I will turn it over to Jillian Lechner from the After School Alliance, who is going to share her perspective on the importance of this work and also discuss some of the opportunities that we have right now to help advance it. Jillian?
Thank you, Heidi. I appreciate that. Thanks. I'm Jillian Lechner with the After School Alliance and just really grateful to be part of this webinar. To begin, I do want to quickly mention, as Heidi mentioned, that we really do at the After School Alliance enjoy looking across state licensing practices across all states in regards to school age. And whatever stage of work you find yourself in, the After School Alliance is really glad to be a partner alongside all of you in this work. So as part of our mission that Heidi referenced, which is to make sure that every student, school-age student who wants an after-school or summer program has access that's affordable, easily to transport to, and accessible, we collect data on family demand for quality after-school programs. And pre-pandemic numbers showed increasing demand for after-school programming from 2004, when we started our parent survey, to 2020. New data from August of this year really shows that unmet demand remains high, and in fact, even slightly increased to 24.7 million families looking for after-school programs. When the pandemic hit, the importance of school-age programming was highlighted more than ever before. Similar to early care programs, out-of-school time programs stepped up and were recognized for their essential work. They showcase their deep connections to families, students, communities, and schools. And school-age programs, even now, are a big piece of the recovery efforts, helping parents get back to work and students navigate and strengthen the social, academic, and emotional skills that were strained during the pandemic. But staff themselves were strained, and programs struggled and continue to struggle to stay afloat. Relief funds were a huge boon to the programs that were able to access them. And from what we've heard, licensure often made it easier for school-age programs to tap into relief funds. For this reason, today's conversation rings especially timely and important, as we have the opportunity to discuss how to meaningfully engage the school-age community into state systems of licensure, and the relief funds continue to remain available for this work. On the next slide. Cohesive systems, which are aware of and inclusive of school-age providers, really offer support to a number of efforts. One of them is sustaining those gains of early learning and ensuring the youth that we've so carefully served from 0 to age 5 continue to have necessary support systems for the 80% of time over the course of the year that they're not in formal education. They also help providers who really want to participate in a system that gives them the conditions, supports, and trainings they need to serve the school-age population under CCDVG. And as Heidi mentioned, that can be training in mental health, connections to school, behavior management, how to deal with early adolescence, identity development, physical wellness, and even screen time. These also keep working parents in jobs over the summer and after school, which, as we mentioned, adds up to important time for the development of school-age youth, but also the development of those parents' careers. While some states have been engaged in this work for years, lessons learned from the pandemic and historic levels of funding that are now available to the field really provide a window of opportunity, and we're seeing leadership thinking strategically about how these investments can be leveraged to support school age. States can and have been using the relief funds, including those available today, the $15 billion of supplemental funds that can be obligated through next year, to make long-term sustainable investments that establish cohesive systems across the continuum from birth to age 13, and set a real foundation for the future work of childcare. Additionally, many states have built on their new connections with school-age providers that were supported as essential during the pandemic, who now have a link to their state agency and the state agency a link to them. They're growing these relationships and weaving them into state systems of support in regards to mapping, licensing, funding, quality, and more. And because school age and after school care has really existed for generations, states are often finding that they don't have to reinvent the wheel, and they're truly leveraging partnerships to build school age inclusive systems. Working with statewide after-school networks and other partners, states are often finding increased access to the school-age program providers and professionals and leaders in the field that help them do this work. They're also able to connect across systems and across silos to offer appropriate professional development, technical assistance, career pathway work, and quality and observational tools that work for the ages and settings served. So we're really seeing this innovation and collaboration across the country, and excited to hear more about these cohesive systems from our speakers today and think about this opportunity ahead. And I'll pass it with that back to Heidi. Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you so much, Jillian. That was really great. Wonderful wealth of information. Now I'd like to turn it over to our first state team presenter, which is Arkansas, Woody Sue and Unica.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share Arkansas's thoughts on addressing school age needs in licensing regulations. I do serve as the Out of School Time Projects Program Coordinator for A-State Childhood Services for 21 years now, with 45 years experience in early childhood, but 21 years focusing on school-age children and youth. Childhood Services is a department within the College of Education on the campus of Arkansas State University in Jonesboro, Arkansas, who has been contracted with the Arkansas Department of Human Services, Division of Childcare and Early Childhood Education for over 45 years to provide training and technical assistance and coaching to all licensed programs in the state, serving center-based programs, serving infant, toddler, preschool, school age, family childcare homes, and out-of-school time standalone programs. I would also like to a special thank you to Anika, who stepped in at the last minute for our colleague Kelly Hilburn, who had a personal emergency. Anika, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. I am Onika Luster, as mentioned earlier, Program Manager for the Arkansas Department of Human Services Division of Childcare and Early Childhood Education, where I currently work in the licensing unit, and I have for the last 17 years. And I'm very passionate, of course, as we all are in the state of Arkansas, with what we do for our children throughout the state. And I was a part of the promulgation back when the out of school time promulgations were being done, and the rules went into effect in 2015. So that is pretty much what, consists of Onika, is just continuing to work passionately throughout the state and making sure that our children have the best quality education. So we look forward to finding out any other information that we can receive today from other states, so that we can definitely continue to improve throughout our state. Thank you so much.
Next slide. Anika told you, go back one, please. Anika told you a little bit about herself and about the Division of Childcare and Early Childhood Education and Licensing. And I shared a little bit about childhood services. Also, since the inception of the Arkansas Out of School Network, one of the 15 statewide networks funded by the C.S. Mott Foundation, and also a sponsored initiative of A-State Childhood Services, we have been able to expand our target audience to include the diversity of out-of-school time programs represented in our state through many network partners. Some of those include faith-based, school-based, community-based, YMCAs, Boys and Girls Clubs, Parks and Recreation, 21 CCLC, many of whom are not currently licensed by the Division of Childcare and Early Childhood Education. However, they are governed by their own national regulations, such as YMCA, the American Camping Association, and Boys and Girls Club. Next slide, please. Some of the thoughts on what prompted Arkansas to revise our school age licensing regulations and create standalone licensing requirements for out of school time programs were a result of the governor's task force on best practices for after school and summer programs, including the recommendations for licensing standards or requirements to be developed to address the unique needs of out of school time programs. Previously, the Arkansas Division of Childcare and Early Childhood Education used the Child Care Center minimum licensing requirements with an individual section for school-age children for licensing all school-age programs, including those referred to as standalone and those that are merged within a child care center-based operation. The task force determined that the emphasis needed to be focused on youth development and support summer and after-school programming that address the aspects related to the development of the whole child, as well as diversity of time and offerings in these diverse programs. And as Anika shared, the minimum licensing requirements for out-of-school time were promulgated in 2014 and went into effect in 2015. Next slide, please. Some of the key differences between how school age was addressed in the former regulations and how it is addressed in the new revised regulations for out-of-school time programs. Most of the emphasis was focused on a youth development theory, the activities, guidance, training, experience for staff, responsibility, small group options, and ratios were addressed. And some of those mentioned in the brief from NCASE. The child care center-based requirements focus on mainly environmental issues, while the out-of-school time requirements have a greater focus on relationships and community building. Next slide, please. What we considered the considerations for enabling the development of standalone out-of-school time regulations and what made that successful was collaboration. I will tell you that the work to develop the minimum licensing requirements for out-of-school time was lengthy. You can see there was a period of about 6 years from the time of the governor's task force throughout the work of finally promulgating the licensing requirements. It was lengthy. It was led by the Division of Childcare and Early Childhood Education and included numerous providers of out-of-school time programs, consultants, representatives from the Arkansas Out-of-School Network. There were numerous meetings, including conference call setups to involve program directors from throughout the state. And for a period of time, there were bi-weekly meetings over a long lunch to review and make recommendations. After a draft was in place, the work was taken out for town meetings to share with providers, parents, and public, and gather their comments and come back and revise again. There were 5 public hearings held in different areas or regions of the state and 2 legislative committee hearings when the rules were promulgated in 2015. Next slide, please. I think our big focus, and hopefully everyone's, is that after school and summer programming is key because it inspires, it keeps children and youth safe, it supports working families, and it inspires youth to learn. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Woody, Sue, and Anika. That was really, really helpful. And it was great that you provided such wonderful detail about what that collaboration process was, and also the contrast between what the regulations had been like before and how they address school age and how they touched on them later. So I know we'll have a chance to unpack that a little bit further in our panel discussion. But for now, I'd like to turn things over to our Oregon team of Alicia and Beth. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us. I'm really excited to talk to you today about how Oregon passed school age specific rules. First of all, I'm Alicia Gardner. I am the Office of Child Care Director in Oregon's Early Learning Division under the Department of Education. Something to note for you all is that Oregon Early Learning Division is the lead agency, but starting next year, July 2023, we will be moving out of Department of Education and into a new standalone agency called Department of Early Learning and Care. This is significant because moving Early Learning Division as the lead agency, and then also the administrators of subsidy payments, we're going to be put together under one roof. So currently our payments are administered by Oregon Department of Human Services. So now we're going to be transformed and put under one roof as Department of Early Learning Care in Oregon. And I will introduce my colleague Beth.
Thank you so much, Alicia. And thank you, Heidi, and the team from NCASE and EDC for having us here to talk about this work. This has been a long time coming for me. I started my career in early childhood and progressed and took my current position 15 years ago because I hadn't seen enough change for school age programs. So I've got a couple of fun facts. When Heidi was talking, NCASE said 45. For Oregon, it's 46% are school age. And we actually have done quite a bit of data collection and gathering. And We know there are 1,700 individual sites. They are on our website. You can actually go and see them. And 87% are co-located in public schools. Yesterday, I had a conversation with one of our large providers who called me and said, well, why do we have to be licensed? And I reflected back on all of the years of work that we've had with the Office of Childcare and all the changes that have gone on through government, and looked at and really it comes down to, what does the law say? The law says that we have to establish minimum standards, training, and monitoring requirements. It's a good thing. And I think that that's my personal stance. One of the things that we were able to accomplish this year with the Office of Childcare is truly having appropriate background checks for all childcare teachers and staff. It's not perfect yet, but the concept and the idea of meeting the law requirements around the central background registry is really a good thing for all children. And then the second piece that the law says is that we have to develop professional development systems to improve the knowledge and skills. And we have done some of that. We haven't done enough. When I started, I remember visiting a program, which was an excellent childcare program, but the professional development for the staff and the implementation within the facility was not age appropriate. So we are both the national network of, so part of the 50 state network, we're also the NAA affiliate. We provide training and technical assistance to programs, whether they are licensed or not. And, but believe that there is real value to the licensure process, and have been thrilled with the new administration in the Child Care Division for their foresight in looking at and understanding. I believe the process went really well, mostly because we had worked so hard to really identify the issues previously. So I'm going to turn it back to Alicia to talk about the work that we did. It seemed to go fast, but for me, it's been a long time coming.
Thank you, Beth. I appreciate that. And so just wanted to kind of reiterate what you said, Beth. For Oregon's after-school childcare community, the majority of our programs are within public schools. And in addition, wanted to point out that Oregon is a primarily rural state. We have pockets of urban areas, but many of our licensed programs are in rural areas within either community centers or public schools. So in prompting what happened and to kind of start all this, one, we are in the process of revising all of our rule sets at the moment. So not just after school, but center and family childcare. And so this, and when we passed school age rules, this was the first step in that process. So wanted to acknowledge that although the school age portion of it did go rather quickly for us, I think in the grand scheme of things, the revisions we've been working on for this rule set have taken nearly a decade. So we have been working on this for quite some time, and that is probably a common thing you might hear across many states when they work on major revisions of rule sets. So let's go ahead and jump into the next slide. Okay, so what prompted all of this is specifically to build something just for school age programs. So really what drove us to make this change was hearing from the community that they needed and desired this rule set. In particular, we heard a lot about from programs that our licensors were often confused or gave confusing technical assistance on which rules applied to them and which rules didn't. It wasn't quite clear in our rule set on that. So some licensors were evaluating over age appropriateness versus the letter of the rule, and it was creating confusion. So one of the biggest drivers was to create a rule set that was very clear for both licensors and programs that these rules do apply to school age programs. And in doing that, we convened many providers and talked about the things that were coming across as confusing or barriers or not age appropriate in school age care. So we did a lot of listening and a lot of intentional collaboration to look at the specific things that are creating those barriers, and we revised them together. And that looked like convening work groups prior to doing our rules advisory committee work, and just hearing from the providers who are doing the actual work. So in House Bill 3073 passed in 2021, directing ELD to adopt rules related to school age childcare. So that desire came not only from us and just doing it intrinsically, but we were also directed to do this in a House bill. And so what are the key topics that were really coming across as the barriers or the things that providers wanted to change? We looked at staff qualifications and thinking about what that looks like in school age care. We looked at the difficult requirements for public schools. So a lot of the public schools and childcares in public schools, I should say, have a lot of duplicative or difficult things to meet within our rule set, or did. So we looked at those specific things, and I have a slide later that'll show you what I mean. And we either removed them where we could or adjusted. And then again, age appropriateness. And so these rules passed on June 29th, 2022, and they will be effective January 1st of 2023. We have not yet implemented them yet. We gave ourselves a 6-month cushion in order to allow time for training, communication, and implementation. Next slide. Okay, so I spoke a little bit about this, but some guiding principles we used were to think about which rules apply to school age programs, and then thinking also about the requirements that are for full day as well as half days. And in many cases, school age programs throughout the school year are only operating for 3 hours a day. And that does factor into what sort of things they are required to do throughout the day. In particular, we think about meal service, or we think about the amount of requirements in programming. Certainly a full day of care would look different when you're thinking about planning your curriculum than a 3-hour day, when children are coming after school and likely they are tired, need some rest and a snack. So we did adjust for those smaller days, and then we built in rules for full days in the summer care as well. And it's important to note that we did build this rule set for centers serving ages 5 through 12 only. This rule set is not for centers that may serve those age groups within the broader context of more age ranges. So really looking and narrowing our scope to ages 5 through 12 only. We also took a plain language approach. We clarified a lot of our policies and practices and put them into rules, so that way they're very transparent for both parties, both licensor and program. We reorganized our rule set in a more logical manner. So we put all of the policies that were throughout the rule book into one section that says policies. And then we did a lot of intentional work to align with caring for our children best practices. Next slide. So this slide really does point out some of the things that we look at that were duplicative or difficult in public school settings. So in thinking about playgrounds, what we know is the public schools really do have jurisdiction over what their playgrounds look like and what their bark chips look like, and where the safety elements are. Those are really deferred to the district. So a childcare operating within a school is not going to have a lot of say over what the playground looks like. And what we were hearing is that if we're regulating to that, it's quite challenging for that program, because then they have to go to the school and make that request, and the school could deny that request. So in our lens, we took the approach of the school district has some regulation from the state already. They are overseen by Department of Education in the districts. So we're going to just go ahead and remove the playground requirement, because if you're operating in a public school, because we know that that is already being looked at by a different government unit. We're all within Department of Ed, but we are quite separate. So planning and zoning, again, we know that public schools are zoned for children. So we did remove those requirements. We moved fire marshal inspections to every 2 years instead of every 1. Then we looked at sinks and bathrooms, fences, required postings, immunizations, and these things are all overseen by schools. Immunizations, fences, sinks, and bathrooms. The required postings is one that we really looked at intentionally, because if you're in a school building, many times programs are told they can't post things on the walls. So we adjusted there and we said, you can have your required postings in a binder for families rather than having them posted on the wall. So it was making these slight adjustments to make things a little bit easier for programs to operate while still respecting the intent of the rule, which is to provide information for families. And lastly, we looked at storage of potentially hazardous materials. This is one that we felt and heard from our programs that this does need to be looked at differently in school age programs, particularly with public schools, because of the way that they're allowed to store things, as well as how much storage space they're given by the school district. And so basically the last thing I have to say to conclude this is that another note about the structures, we have two separate types of school age programs in Oregon. We have what's called recorded school age and we have licensed school age. And our main goal was really that in order to create an easier pathway for licensure for these programs, they can then access subsidy, because through recorded programs, they are not eligible for subsidy. So it was trying to create a pathway to get more programs licensed in the school age care, so that way we can serve additional families through ERDC and subsidy. And we have yet to find out if this is going to be successful, because again, these rules don't take effect till January 1st, but we are quite hopeful that this is going to be the case based on what we've heard.
Thank you so much, both Alicia and Beth. And I just want to thank both of our state teams. You have both provided some really wonderful, very concrete and specific examples of both the differences in how school age was addressed in prior regulations and school age standalone in the case of Arkansas. And then Alicia, I know you spoke to what we have certainly heard from the field many times as being a central challenge for school age programs that are operating in public school buildings, how they can address and meet the different licensing requirements. And I think that you've provided some fantastic specific ways that you've been able to try to address this with Oregon. So I know we want to move into our panel discussion now and invite all of our state presenters and Jillian to come back and be here. I have a couple of just two quick follow-up questions that I'd love to pose to each of the state teams, and then I'm going to bring in some of the questions that we've heard from the chat. So my first question is actually going to go to the Oregon team. So I know you mentioned the 6-month rollout period before the full implementation. Can you talk just a little bit about some of the specific types of trainings and communications that you're engaging in right now during this time before the full implementation, and what that looks like and what the purpose of that time frame is for the rollout?
Absolutely. So we did pick 6 months intentionally. The biggest reason for that was because we have to make significant tech changes in our database system. So in order to create a new type of care, even though under our center statutes, we wanted to be able to differentiate and build in the rules differently into our database. So the biggest reason for this is because we need time to do those tech changes. However, we are also using this as an opportunity to get the message out. So we're building we're in the process of planning and prepping for a couple of webinars to train our school age providers on the new rules. We're using this time to get rule books printed and get them out in advance. So that way we can begin to ramp up and use our licensors to answer any questions as we move to the new rules. And of course, internal training for our staff is something that we're working on weekly, because the rules are so significantly different because they're part of this bigger revision. It really is thinking about what new forms do we need? What new TA are licensors needing to provide? How does that look to us? How do we regulate to something like this? So it's a blessing that the IT team told us that we need 6 months, because we are using that time to our advantage.
And we are meeting on a regular basis with the Office of Child Care. So it was bi-weekly prior to the rules, and we're now sort of every 3 weeks having conversations with OCC staff on forms and training and updates. So working together.
Great, thank you so much. And then my next question is for the Arkansas team. So in your case, you are well past the full implementation of the standalone school age regulation. And so I'm just going to blend one of my questions with one that's come in from the audience, which is what would you say with the benefit of the experience that you've had now from the year-long implementation has been some of the chief realized benefits of having these standalone regs? And somewhat related to that, have you seen an increase in the number of school age programs that are seeking licensure since the time of those regulations going into effect?
Thank you, Heidi. Some of the thoughts on the benefits of the out-of-school time licensing. Of course, one is to encourage the cycle of continuous program quality improvement. And at the beginning or before the beginning, we had already done some piloting with school age programs in the state and a partnership with the Weichert Center to see what the use of the PQA, the program quality assessment, would be as to affect what its effect would be to access the quality of programming across a wide spectrum of program settings. So that included licensed programs and 21 CCLC programs, faith-based in some of those. Another benefit I think that we've talked about is to access local, state, and philanthropic funding, such as vouchers, the American Rescue Plan Act funds, food nutrition programs that supplant meals or snacks in after school and summer programming. Of course, I think the basics is accountability of those health and safety standards. Requirements are more specific to the unique needs of school age programs. There is a stronger voice in providing input for minimum licensing requirements from out-of-school time program providers. I think a big one is the appropriateness of training and professional development, not only the content, but also is the offering conducive to the time for out-of-school time providers to access the training. And then one of the big benefits is that out-of-school time licensing is also a foundation for our quality rating improvement system called Arkansas Better Beginnings. So all licensed programs start at level 1 in that system. I think, Anika, did I miss anything?
No, I think you did a wonderful job, Woody. I would just like to add, the quality rating system goes up currently to level 3. We're in the process of promulgations for the additional levels of 4 through 6 starting next year. And currently there has been an increase with the number of school age programs that operate in the state of Arkansas. And partly that is due to the ARPA funding, because our ARPA funding has put emphasis on not only our infant toddler programs, but our school age programming. So we have had a lot of funding that has been able to be accessible to providers in order to expand those out of school time programs because we saw the need. Now, currently we have about our total capacity for out of school time is about 26,297 participants. And we are expecting, as I said, that number to increase as we move forward and allocate additional funding through ARPA.
Great, thank you. And I know related to the QRS question, because this has just also popped up in the chat too, and thank you for preempting that. Oregon, would you like to say anything to that effect too about the intersection between the way that you have the standalone school age regulations and how that might interact with QRS regulations?
Absolutely. So our QRIS system is currently in a state of revision at the moment. So as far as the opportunities are there, I think we've still got a lot to explore and excited about those opportunities. But as it stands right now, because we're in the revision process, I don't have any significant updates in that because we are looking at a restructure.
Great, thank you. And I know we had a question come up in the chat about the how the regulations interact with school systems and after-school programs that are integrated into school buildings. And I believe it sounded to me like Oregon spoke to this a lot. The person who put that question in, if that did not answer your question and you still have additional details that you want to know about that, please go ahead and drop that into the chat. We did have a couple questions about how these separated regulations work, because both of you had talked about how this applied to school age only type programs and not programs that serve school age within a larger mix of ages, either at centers or in family childcare. So could you speak a little bit about how in your state school age is addressed when those children are being served in those mixed age environments, and whether there might be, if there are any planned revisions or discussions going on about how to apply the same lens to those contexts as well?
So the training that we provide through the network, we are seeing an increase in the number of family child care providers that serve school age coming and taking our training. We also help support the resource and referral agencies, so they will contract with us to provide the school age training. So that's two small ways that we are trying to address that in a multi-age setting.
And I would say we are working on our significant revisions of all rule sets, and doing school age first, we are looking at what makes sense to put in for school age care in the bigger centers. So if you're serving ages 0 through 12, when you are caring for school agers, what rules out of that set can we move over? And we are going through that process right now. There are going to be some things that are likely different, but we do imagine that many of the things will carry over.
Great, thank you. And then I have another question here about, for the state teams, about whether they were able to waive or substitute health and safety requirements that did not seem age appropriate to school age. So is that something that, something like that might exist specifically more toward infants? And if infants are not served in a school age only program, what were you able to do, if anything, around those types of substitutions?
So, oh, I see. Woody's got to come off mute, so I'll let her go first.
For Arkansas, the health and safety requirements, we tried to address those that are specific to school age children and youth. I think one of the areas in our licensing had to do with supervision of children. Like during the day, school age children are allowed to go down the hall with a partner or with a pass from one offering to another, and we tried to implement some of those things. But if it was related to infant toddler care, it did not carry over to the school age care.
And I would echo that. We also put in a similar requirement around supervision in the bathroom, where we're giving school agers the opportunity to go to the bathroom by themselves, just like they would in public school. And in addition, we removed some of the stricter rules regarding hazards. So, scissors, things that kids would be using in school anyway. We're less strict about that. We don't have rules about that for school age care. And in addition, we've changed the wording around storage of toxic materials to just be inaccessible rather than under a childproof lock. So if something were on a high shelf or something out of the way, that's going to be okay for a school age program, versus for infants and toddlers, we require a childproof lock.
Thank you. And that you both also addressed one of the other questions that came up too, which is about how supervision is handled, and specifically that example of children going to the restroom alone during the school day, and then sometimes under existing regulations not being able to do so, which affects supervision and staff ratios and required staffing. So thank you for jumping on both of those. So another question here about how in your states, how you measure and support quality environments for programs that are using shared space. And I'm going to assume that that means programs that are they're utilizing things like the public school buildings. But if that's not the right interpretation, if somebody could just drop in the chat a clarification for that, that would be great. So in the meantime, if either of the state teams can speak to how you measure and support quality environments for programs using shared space.
And Heidi, the person who asked the question said that's exactly what he was asking.
Great.
And I would say it's very difficult. So we still we have a lot of work to do with superintendents and principals around shared space. Because when a principal comes in and says, oh, I need to move you today, well, you can't do that. And I think that there's a lack of understanding around those. So we're thinking at the network level. We have done a lot of work with the Department of Education and the other after-school programs operated by schools or by exempt groups, in thinking about how do we help superintendents and principals understand the value. They have so many rules for themselves. So I think we have work to be done there.
For Arkansas, I would say that building that relationship with school principals and counselors and school superintendents and school board members would be an important critical aspect. And also in shared space, we've been successful in implementing the quality rating improvement system with using the youth program quality intervention standards and items. And so that has not been a big issue for Arkansas, I would say. Now, there are probably those individual circumstances, but we try to help programs work through that and bridge that gap through the understanding from the school day and make that a connection from the school day to the after school program or summer.
So with what Woody said, one of the things that we did over the last couple of years was in Oregon, primarily most of the schools use PBIS. And so we developed training for after school folks on PBIS and have done it both in English and in Spanish. So when a program operator is in a school building, they're saying and using and doing the same language pieces that schools do.
Great, thank you. And I know we're coming up at the top of the hour, and I think we got to most of the questions that came in. I know we didn't get to every single one of them, so I apologize if we did not get to yours. I just want to ask for a quick parting thought from both of our state teams. I know you both talked about the incredible value of that ongoing and in-depth collaborative connection building work that you did within your states. That was a years-long process, understandably so. As we have states thinking right now about how they can best get started with this, and just at least kickstart the process, what would you say would be some of the biggest critical things for states to keep in mind at the outset of who to bring to the table, how to start this process so that you've got a robust infrastructure development in the works, at least?
A few thoughts on that is, first of all, start with why it is important. I think you have to have a shared vision or a mission statement of moving forward, of what the goal is that you have in mind. Of course, I think one of the benefits and one of the suggestions Arkansas would make would be the building relationships in that collaboration process, building all of those relationships with colleges, universities, state agencies, Department of Ed, advocacy groups, foundations, businesses, banking, cities, public schools, and especially your legislators who are involved in any kind of education committees on the state level. Another one is build upon what you currently have, looking at your center-based licensing regulations and seeing if there's anything in there that can be pertinent and specific to out of school time. And then I think a big one is recognizing those barriers or challenges. Many times we have to try to put a square peg in a round hole and try to avoid that with recognizing that there are those barriers or challenges.
And thanks so much. I'm afraid I'm going to have to close us out because we are at the top of the hour. So thank you so much to all of our presenters. We would appreciate if our participants have time to complete a feedback form to help us continually improve our offerings. And while folks are doing that, Kate's putting a link in the chat. You'll also receive an email with the link. And Heidi, I'll let you just close us out with thanks to our presenters.
I just want to give another huge thank you to all of our presenters. You really just provided such a wealth of information. And again, I think those concrete examples you gave of before and after and the processes are really going to help other states as they think about unfolding this work. So thank you to Jillian from Afterschool Alliance, and again to ECQA for taking the time to review our brief. And thank you to all of us for joining us this afternoon or morning, depending on where you are.
And we'll have the room open for another 5 minutes in case folks have a couple minutes to complete the feedback form. Thank you.